Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Are there any questions before we start today? Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the peripheral nervous system. So your learning outcomes are to describe the series of events during a spinal reflex, distinguish between the somatic and autonomic divisions of the peripheral nervous system, and distinguish between the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions of the autonomic division. So the peripheral nervous system contains the cranial nerves, which arise from the brain, spinal nerves, which arise from the spinal cord, and ganglia are collections of nerve cells, bodies outside the CNS. So here's the structure of a nerve. So we have a single nerve fiber, and then a bundle of nerve fibers, and of course those have arteries and veins. So cranial nerves, the 12 pairs of nerves attached to the brain. They're referred to by Roman numerals and name. Some cranial nerves contain only sensory fibers, some only motor fibers, others are mixed. Concerned with the head, neck, and facial regions, the vagus nerve, X, has branches to the neck and internal organs. So there's lots of cranial nerves. We have some from olfactory receptors, from the retinas of the eyes, to the eye muscles, from mouth into the jaw muscles, from taste buds into facial muscles and glands, from the inner ear, from the pharynx and the pharyngeal muscles, to tongue muscles, and then from and to internal organs. So spinal nerves emerge from either side of the spinal cord. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. The posterior root contains sensory fibers, and cell bodies of sensory neurons are in the dorsal root ganglia. The ventral root contains motor fibers. The two roots join to form a spinal nerve. All spinal nerves are mixed nerves. So the somatic system serves the skin, skeletal muscles, and tendons, and not all somatic motor actions are voluntary. Some are automatic, which we call reflexes, which are automatic responses to a stimuli. So reflex arc, sensory neurons enter the cord and stimulate many interneurons. Some of these interneurons synapse with motor neurons. Nerve signals then travel in these motor fibers to an effector, which brings about a response to the stimulus. So some of the interneurons involved carry nerve signals to the brain for perception. Okay, so here's the event in a spinal reflex. So we have the dendrite of the sensory neuron, goes to the dorsal root ganglion, and then that's picked up by dendrites of the interneuron. And then the cell body of the motor neuron goes to the ventral root, and then the axon of the motor neuron to the effector muscle. So autonomic system regulates cardiac and smooth muscles, organs, and glands. It's divided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. These two systems create opposite responses. They're both involuntary and they innervate all internal organs, and they use 2 neurons and 1 ganglion for each impulse. So here's the 2 divisions of the nervous system. So we have the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord. Then we have the peripheral nervous system, which is the sensory afferent nerves, which carry sensory information into the brain and spinal cord, and the motor efferent nerves, which carry motor information from CNS to effectors. So somatic sensory nerve signals from skin, muscles, joints, and special senses. And then the visceral sensory nerves signals from body organs. Then we have the somatic motor nerves, which signals the skeletal muscles and are voluntary. And the autonomic motor nerves, which signal to smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands, which are involuntary. And then we have the sympathetic division, which is fight or flight, and the parasympathetic division, which is rest and digest. Okay, and that's shown here. So if we compare the somatic motor and autonomic motor pathways, the type of control for the somatic pathway is voluntary and involuntary. For the autonomic motor pathways, for the sympathetic and parasympathetic, those are involuntary. And the number of neurons per message, so there's 1 in the somatic motor pathway and 2 in the autonomic motor pathways. The location of the motor fiber in the somatic motor pathway is most cranial nerves and all spinal nerves. And then the major difference there is the neurotransmitters. So in the somatic motor pathway, there's acetylcholine, and then there's norepinephrine and acetylcholine in the autonomic. And then the effectors there are skeletal muscles for the somatic motor pathway, and then smooth and cardiac muscles, glands, and organs for the autonomic pathway. Okay, so the sympathetic division, most preganglionic fibers arise from the middle portion of the spinal cord and terminate in ganglia that lie near the cord. So preganglionic fiber is short, postganglionic is long. And these are active during emergency situations when you might be required to fight or take flight, increases the heartbeat and dilates their airways for a ready supply of glucose and oxygen, and inhibits the digestive and urinary organs. So the neurotransmitter released by the postganglionic axon is norepinephrine, and the structure of norepinephrine is like that of epinephrine, which is adrenaline. So the parasympathetic division includes a few cranial nerves and fibers that arise from the bottom portion of the spinal cord. The preganglionic fiber is long, the postganglionic fiber is short, and ganglia lie near within target organ. This promotes responses associated with the relaxed state. So this promotes digestion of food and slows your heart rate. So parasympathetic division can be called rest and digest system. And the neurotransmitter used by this parasympathetic division is acetylcholine. Okay, so moving on to drugs that interact with the brain. So cocaine and crack are powerful stimulants that interfere with the uptake of dopamine at synapses, increasing overall brain activity. The result is a sense of well-being that lasts from 5 to 30 minutes. This is followed by fatigue, depression, and irritability. And long-term use of cocaine causes a loss of metabolic functions in the brain. So here's an image showing you that. So before chronic cocaine use, brain is more active in these red areas. And then after chronic cocaine use, the brain is less active. So crack is the street name given to cocaine that is processed to a freebase form for smoking. It's highly addictive. The brain makes less dopamine to compensate for the extra. The user experiences withdrawal symptoms and an intense craving for cocaine. Overdosing on cocaine can cause cardiac or respiratory arrest. Okay, so methamphetamine and ecstasy are powerful stimulants, often produced in home laboratories. They're available as a powder that can be snorted or as crystals that can be smoked. Causes a rush of euphoria, energy, alertness, and elevated mood, and typically followed by a state of agitation and sometimes violent behavior. Okay, so chronic use can result in amphetamine psychosis, which is paranoia, hallucinations, irritability, and erratic behavior. And ecstasy is chemically related to methamphetamine. So heroin is derived from the opium poppy plant, and drugs derived from opium are called opiates, which includes morphines and codeine, and causes feelings of euphoria along with relief of pain. And addiction is very common. So heroin binds to endorphin receptors. With repeated use, the production of endorphins decreases, and this is how you develop tolerance, which means you need to take more heroin to prevent withdrawal symptoms. So you get tremors, restlessness, cramps, and vomiting, and the original euphoria is no longer felt. So users often acquire hepatitis, HIV, and AIDS, and other things. Addiction can be treated with synthetic opiates such as methadone. Okay, so marijuana and K2, the names cannabis and marijuana apply to either the plant THC, the active ingredient. Marijuana can be ingested, but usually is smoked in a cigarette called a joint. The user experiences mild euphoria, along with alterations in vision and judgment. So heavy use can cause hallucinations, anxiety, depression, paranoia, and psychotic symptoms. K2 or spice is a synthetic compound about 10 times as potent as THC, which is typically sprayed into a mixture of other herbal products and smoked. So drugs that influence the CNS. So we have alcohol, which is a depressant that you drink. We have nicotine, which is a stimulant, which is usually smoked. Cocaine is also a stimulant, which is sniffed, snorted, injected, or smoked. Then we have methamphetamine and ecstasy, which are a stimulant. These can be smoked or pill form. We have heroin, which is a depressant, which is sniffed, snorted, injected, or smoked. And then we have marijuana, K2, which is a psychoactive, which is smoked or consumed. Okay, so that'll be it for today's lecture. Are there any questions out there?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
For the case study that we're gonna be doing, is that gonna be a presentation or just like a paper to turn in?
I think there's just a paper to turn in. I'd have to double check with you.
And like, how are we gonna know which patient are we gonna be studying, or do we have to select it, or you're gonna assign us one?
I think you guys will pick the one you want to use.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, any other questions? And did you see that you guys were assigned groups in Canvas?
Yes, so we had to do it together as a group, or each one has to turn in one paper?
You guys are gonna work on it as a group.
Oh, okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It's also for the case study. I know our professor for the lab mentioned that we would be assigned the same group number as the same case study number option. Is that correct?
That might be correct. I'd have to double check.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure how he's assigning people to group numbers. I'll have to check with him.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, sounds good, guys. I'll catch you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.